Namaskar, welcome to ScreenKraft. This is your host Rohit Zail. The world is facing a serious threat in the name of Islamic terrorism or Islamic extremism, be it ISIS, Lashkar-e-Toiba or the Taliban. To help us understand this threat better, today we have with us a very special individual. He belongs to the 1970 batch of Indian Administrative Service, and he was quickly handpicked by the Government of India to serve in the Cabinet Secretariat and the Defence Ministry. Subsequently, in 1995, he went on to serve as a secretary to the President of India. From the year 2006 to 2014, he was a senior advisor to the President of Afghanistan, the sole non-Afghan in that apex presidential establishment, and was responsible for defining and establishing norms for the harmonious functioning of the three pillars of the newly established constitution, that is the government, the National Assembly and the Supreme Court. It is a great honor and pleasure in welcoming Mr. Shrinivas Sohoni. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and my warm greetings to all here.
So I'll come to a more serious question right now is the global threat of the Islamic terrorism or extremism that we are all seeing today, and no country is spared, be it India, be it Afghanistan, Spain, Paris, Africa. You have studied a comparative religion, and especially you have done a vast research on Islam. What do you make of this Islamic terrorism or extremism, and what do you think would be the best strategical possible way to combat this problem?
Well, that is indeed a very deep question. It has many dimensions to it. And it is very right on your part to say that it's a serious question affecting the whole world. In fact, Rohit, I would go so far as to say that this threat of Islamic extremism, a subset of which is terrorism, this contest between Islamic extremism and humanity is one of the defining features of the 21st century. It is as major a problem as that. But to understand that problem in all its dimensions and to see how it relates to especially India or to our region and to the world, and how to combat it, to counter it, to neutralize it, to defeat it, one has to examine Islam itself. One has to have an accurate understanding of Islam, a proper understanding of Islam, of an understanding also of the life of the Prophet, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as also Islamic history and geopolitics. Geopolitics in the regions in which this problem exists and where it is likely to spread to. As also one has to understand the context in which it is growing today, the information age, the age of instant information, real-time information, real-time visuals, audios, and the capacity to modulate opinions, to influence minds, the techniques of indoctrination and so on. But let me first focus on two key principal ideas which influence perceptions. Perception is reality. Reality is a matter of perception. What I perceive, what you perceive, what friends here perceive is the truth, is actually their perception of the truth, not necessarily the truth. It may be, it may not be. It's perception that is important. So one of the key perceptions is that there is this behemoth of the Islamic Ummah, or Leviathan, or monolithic entity of 1.8 billion, which is the Islamic Ummah. That is a perception. and that influences people's approaches, both those who are part of the fold of Islam and those who are not. But what is the fact? Fact of the matter is that this ummah is the Arabic word for the larger Islamic community. It has other words also like qaum or millat, and all these words, all three words, have the sound ma in it, which is the labial sound, which is associated with everything deeply emotional and sentimental. That is why in large number of languages the word for mother is ma. Mother itself is with m, mater, matra, madar, and so on. The letter m. So ummah, qaum, millat, all have that. So this ummah is far from one solid monolithic body. It was divided at the very moment of the passing of the Prophet of Islam. The moment he passed away, he left his mortal coils, started the division in the Muslim community, because those on the side of Abu Bakr, who became the first caliph, were on one side. Those on the part of Ali, who was the Prophet's son-in-law and his cousin, came on the other side, and then started the Sunni Shia rift, which had immense political, social, military consequences, dividing the whole community. Right from 632, when the Prophet passed away, till the present day, when the entire scenario in North Africa, West Asia, Syria, the Levant as we call it, all that is going on, ISIS affected area, it is basically a Sunni Shia conflict with many other entities involved in it. So right from 632 to the present day 2017 into the unfolding future is this major division between Sunnis and Shias. But then if you look carefully, you find that even in the Sunni community, in the Sunni section of Islam, which is by and large 80% of the Ummah, there is tremendous division, subdivision, and further division. Tremendous division. I mean, for example, take the case of India itself, where the Sunni community is 80% of the Muslims of India. So here we have Darul Uloom Deoband, the adherents of which are called Deobandis, or we have the Barelvi community, from basically the leaders of which are in Barelvi, the Barelvi school as it is called. They are antagonists. The Tablighi Jamaat of the Deobandis and the Barelvis are very difficult to bring together even on a podium to discuss things. They are opposed to each other in doctrinal terms, in organizational terms, in terms of public statements, in terms of interpretation of the niceties of Islam, practice and procedure. And then you have others also. You have the Khojas, the Bohras, and the Sufis. All these have their own interpretation of what Islam is, what Islam's principal doctrines are, what Islam's major procedures and practices are. They have differences on personal law, they have differences on interpretation of Islamic history, and so on. In the Sunni fold, likewise in the Shia fold, you have the Jafari school of Islam, you have the Ismaili school of Islam, you have the Zaydi school of Islam, and the divisions there too, and further subdivisions. And all these divisions and subdivisions vis-a-vis each other have very strong opinions. So there is a constant state of tension and conflict and quite frequent violence as well, as between Muslims within the Ummah. So that central idea of one monolithic Islamic community, one Ummah, is actually not the case. It is highly fragmented. And secondly, it is greatly in conflict within, So you would have heard, friends here would have heard about the attacks on Shia mosques, whether in Afghanistan or Pakistan. Now in Afghanistan, this is not traditional. In Afghanistan, there is no real history of attacks on Shia mosques. This is recent, and those attacks are traceable to entities in Pakistan who seek to accentuate these differences, to further communalize the relations within Afghan society as between Sunnis and Shias. But in Pakistan, there are regular attacks, and Pakistan ever since 1947 has a history of conflict and violence perpetrated on Shias by Sunnis. So this is something which is a fact of life. Two things, as I mentioned. One, that the concept of one enormous global ummah is really not the case. They are greatly divided, subdivided and fragmented. And secondly, that opposition to each other, all these, and in conflict with each other, in perennial tension and sporadic violence with each other. So this is part of the thing. Now coming to Islam, the word Islam itself has three root sounds in it: Sin, Lam and Mim, SLM as we say. And together they have a meaning. Just like in Sanskrit language, every letter in the Sanskrit language has a meaning, in fact several meanings. Likewise Arabic also, the letters of Arabic, each Arabic letter has a meaning by itself, not word. Each word of course has a meaning, but each letter of Arabic language has meanings, more than one meanings. So Sin, Lam and Mim together, which form Islam, stand for submission, total submission to the Almighty, total submission to the Almighty. That is why the claim is that Islam is a religion of peace, that Islam seeks real and pure peace, peaceful submission to the Almighty. When we look at the verses of the Quran Sharif, the ayats of the Quran Sharif, when we look at Islam, you have to consider Islam's principal scripture, which is the Quran Sharif. Quran Sharif is Quran the Noble, or Quran Majid, which is Quran the Glorious. The verses of the Quran Sharif, which number around 6,300. There are different interpretations as to whether to count a particular verse as one verse or two verses. So the total number of verses in the Quran Sharif range broadly between 6,300, are accepted to range between 6,300 to 6,400 verses in 114 chapters, which are called surahs. But these chapters and verses were not revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam at one go, at one time. They were revealed over a period of 22 years. At first it was revealed to him in 610 AD, when he was at the age of 40. And intermittently, from time to time, he had these wahis, as it is called, the revelations which came to him, which are regarded by Muslims as the words of Almighty Allah Himself. Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, as the Muslims say. So these intimations, these wahis, these revelations, they came to him, to the Prophet, from 610 AD to right up to 632 AD, when the last chapter, which was all revealed at one go, Surah Al-Tawbah, which was revealed. But in the Quran, the chapters and verses do not come in chronological order. They are interspersed from different times and periods throughout the Quran. In fact, in a particular chapter itself, there could be verses of different times. And the chapter itself could be later or earlier, depending on how it was stacked. The theory is that the Quran was put together as you would put together a stack of books, large, small, of medium size. If you put them together, you largely put them together, the largest on one side and in descending order. But to that also there are exceptions. The chapters, the largest chapter is the second chapter, Al-Baqarah, and the smallest chapter, it is only a couple of verses. So when you study that, you find that the chapters and the verses of the Makkah period of the life of the Prophet, because as you know, the Prophet originally started getting these revelations when he was in Makkah in 610, and he continued there for 12 more years. And a large portion, in fact the largest number of chapters and verses of the Quran are revealed in the Makkah period of the Prophet's life. And then there is the Medina period, which is counted from 622 onwards, after the migration, the Hijri. So here in Makkah, when he was in Makkah, the Prophet was a preacher. I'm talking when in his role as a prophet. When he started getting these revelations, he started introducing Islam to the people of Makkah, who were originally either Jews, or they were Christians, or they were pagans and animists. So when he started preaching them at that time, he was rather more inclusive. At that time he was not a sultan, he was not a ruler, he was not a lawgiver, he was in the preacher mode. He was a prophet, of course, he has been declared to be a prophet, but he was at that time spreading the message of Islam. After the shift to Medina, gradually, once the battles started to be won, the battle of Badr, the battle of Khandak, the battle of Khaybar, and all the other battles, he had become by then commander-in-chief, a military leader of great acumen, by the way, very great strategist, tactician, and himself a fighter, himself a warrior. So he had become that, in fact a warrior commander-in-chief. But he had also become a sultan, a ruler, a temporal authority. He had also become, apart from being commander-in-chief, he had also become a ruler. He had become Sultan in Medina, as he is known of today. And on top of that, he had also been the role of a lawgiver, as a ruler and a lawgiver. He was propounding laws which had to be followed by the Muslim community, by the believers. He was that also. And he was a negotiator. He was a diplomat par excellence. So he had all these roles together. And throughout, in this capacity also, he was a prophet. He was getting these intimations. So there is a qualitative difference in the tenor and tone of the verses of the Quran Sharif, the Quran Majid, the Quran Pak as it is called, as between the Meccan period and the Medina period. So it is a matter of interpretation as to how to interpret those verses. It's all a matter of how one interprets it, and who is qualified to interpret it best. In the matter of human predicaments, when you have a problem, when you have a question, when you have a serious issue to be considered, then the choice is as to whether one should interpret it oneself from the Quran, or whether to consult someone who has had requisite formal training and learning and been certified to be an alim or maulana. So it's all a matter of interpretation. Now, what the extremists do, the extremists pick out verses of the Quran which serve their purpose. What is their purpose? Their purpose is to indoctrinate the world at large to turn to violence for global conquest of their version of Islam. Global conquest, make no mistake about it. The extremist ambition, the extremist goal is not conquest of one country or one region, it is of global conquest. So their strategy is to draw upon the verses of the Quran Sharif itself and the narratives relating to the life of the Prophet, the sayings of the Prophet, the doings of the Prophet, which is called the Hadith. The Hadith are compilations relating to the words spoken by the Prophet himself, the teachings of the Prophet, or the doings of the Prophet, what he did in certain scenario, to use that to interpret the verses of the Quran, emulate the Prophet, to be the best possible Muslim in accord with the teachings of the Prophet, aligned with the message of Prophet Muhammad, which is the Quran Sharif, that is the words of Almighty Allah. So the hadiths, so what they do is to pick out those verses which suit their purpose, pick out those hadiths which suit their purpose, propagate them, to do what? To produce what effect? To produce the effect in the minds of people that to be a good Muslim, you have to wage war. And here there are two very important ideas which are propagated in the narrative of extremism. One is that the whole world is divided into two parts. One is Darul Harb and the other is Darul Islam. Darul Harb is the world of war. Darul Harb is a world of war, the abode of war. Darul Islam is the abode of peace. What is Darul Islam? What is Darul Islam? What is the abode of peace? Abode of peace, they propagate, is those areas, those countries, those nations where the ruling authority is Islam and where Sharia is the law, and the population is respectful, obedient and subordinate to Sharia and to the ruling authority, Islamic rule. That is Darul Islam, the abode of peace. What is abode of war? Darul Harb, that area where the ruling authority is not Islamic. It can be anything, it can be Christian or Buddhist or whatever. It can be belonging to no religion in particular, or it can be pluralistic like in India, secular as you like to call it. That is Darul Harb. And the duty of each and every Muslim, according to the extremist narrative, who is living in Darul Harb, is to strive by all means to convert Darul Harb into Darul Islam. And to do so, fighting is the highest duty of the Muslim. They propagate, the extremists propagate. And you may not want to fight, but you must realize that fighting is your highest duty. And if you fight, you are a hero, you are a warrior for Islam. If you lose your life in the battle for Islam, you become shaheed, you have shahadat, and you qualify for the highest heavens and the greatest range of all the sensual pleasures that one could look for, with fountains and streams and velvet cushions and servants and so on and so forth, all the paradise, Firdaus as it is called. So while living, if you commit yourself to fighting for Islam, using violence, and there is a verse in the Quran Sharif that after the holy months are over, there are 4 holy months in Islam, beginning with Muharram, month of Muharram. After the 4 holy months are over, then you must sit in ambush and kill the disbeliever wherever you find him. So they say that this is now applicable to you also. You must also do this. So on and so forth. There are many verses like that, all belonging to the Medina section of the Quran Sharif. So the narrative of the extremists is to incite violence by Muslims as a duty, as the highest Islamic duty. And how do they do it? These days they do it very effectively using cyberspace, but also linking up with other channels of malefic influence, narcotics trade, the slave trade, the trade in contraband. They pass through the same channels, the arms trade, all these pass through the same channels that are used. So far as India is concerned, we are a target. We are very much a target of a very concerted strategy of Islamic extremism and terrorism. That is a matter of fact that we have to realize. But so is the rest of the world. So is the rest of the world. So is Europe. So is the US, and in fact in South America also. It's a complex process, because on the one hand you have a narrative which is propagated through tech-savvy means, backed by tremendous funds, by hawala, which is very difficult to detect and stop. So on the one hand you have that. And you have a country like Pakistan whose whole and sole motive is to attack India, to destroy India, conquer India. That is the single-minded purpose of General Headquarters Rawalpindi. Let us make no bones about it. They may pass through various stages of so-called rapprochement or trying to make friends, but the central aim of the Pakistan regime, in de facto regime is the army regime, is to attack, destroy, conquer India. Jihad fi sabilillah, that is the motto. Jihad fi sabilillah, that is the motto of the Pakistan army. And in fact, every officer who passes through the portals of the Pakistan Military Academy takes an oath to take revenge against India for the defeat in 1971. So, and they use all those channels of narcotics and drug smuggling, as well as slave trade or trade in contraband, whatever, and insurgencies of any kind to propagate this. So to combat that requires a complex process. The main thing is, of course, on the one side you can take kinetic measures, surveillance, police action, arm control, etc., and all that. That is on one side. But one of the major things that have to be done is to combat the extremist narrative. The extremist narrative, which is based on the Quran Sharif and the Hadith, Islamic history, that has to be combated with a counter narrative. There is the extremist narrative, but there are many different narratives. Take the version of Badshah Khan, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, Sarhad Gandhi, the frontier Gandhi, the compatriot of Mahatma Gandhi on one side. His version of Islam is totally different. I used to be at one time, more than 3 decades ago, in addition to my duties, advisor to Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan when he was staying with us in Raj Bhavan, Mumbai. That was in 1985, 86, 87. At that time we used to have discussions. So once we were talking about secularism and Gandhi and non-violence. At that time I remember Badshah Khan, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, whom we used to call Baba, he said, Rao Sahib, he used to call me Rao Sahib. मैंने सेक्युलरिज्म गांधी से नहीं सीखा, मैंने सेक्युलरिज्म कुरान में पाया. This was his view. He used to say, कुरान इस्लाम सिखाता है कि हमारे बंदों की खिदमत, that is the service of one's fellow man, खुदा की इबादत, prayer to Allah, खुदा की इबादत हमारे बंदों की खिदमत में है, सर्विस ऑफ फेलो मैन. खुदा रब्बुल मुस्लिमीन नहीं है, ही इज नॉट द गॉड ऑफ द मुस्लिम्स अलोन. खुदा रब्बुल आलमीन है, खुदा रब्बुल आलमीन. In peace, in service, in good works, in humility is the true Islam. That is what he used to say, that the killing of one life amounts to the killing of all humanity, that the killing of one life amounts to the killing of all humanity, the saving of one life amounts to the saving of all humanity. This is his version of Islam. Maulana Azad, Abul Kalam Azad, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who became our first education minister, he was a Makkah-born Muslim. He was an Arab descent. He became an alim at the age of 16. And he was a graduation, high degree of Islamic learning. He wrote the famous Tarjuman al-Quran Sharif, the interpretation of Quran Sharif. What was his view? He writes about Surah al-Fatiha, the first surah in Quran Sharif, Fatiha al-Fatah. He says that is the Ummul Quran, meaning the soul of the Quran. He says that teaches us peace, that teaches us pluralism, that teaches us love of all humankind. So we have to have a counter narrative built for each of the verses that the extremists use to propagate extremism and extremist violence. There has to be a counter narrative built based on Quran Sharif and Hadith to show what is the alternative, peace-loving, secular, plural meaning of those verses, and to propagate it using the same channels of media, same cyberspace, same multimedia, audiovisual media to communicate. That is one part of it. One part of it. The second part of it is to design a multidimensional approach, not just a police approach. When a person gets radicalized, extremized if I may say so, who is the first to notice? It's a young person, let us say someone in 12th standard or college or just into service or doing some work, or is unemployed. Whether the person who is poor or rich, qualified, unqualified, at a young age, a youth. Who is the first to notice? It is his family, his classmates, his friends. They are the first to notice the behavioral change taking place in him. Not only are they the first to notice, they are the first to be affected. And if he goes the wrong way and commits acts of extremist Islam, violence, then they are the first to be adversely affected. So they have the most to lose also. Not only do they lose that person, whether he is a young man or a young lady, but they have themselves to lose seriously, a family member and their own family. So they have to be alert. They have to collaborate with Islamic clerics, the mullahs and the Maulavis, and they have to cooperate with the authorities to bring that person to the right lines, to show him that he is going the wrong way. And this is the model that we are adopting now. That, for example, in Maharashtra, government of Maharashtra, Maharashtra police, Maharashtra civil society, they are adopting this approach that we have succeeded to a great extent in combating this menace.